Hey guys, welcome to a brand new video on the channel. In this video, I'm actually going to share with you the RCMP update with regards to the CRA scam. Enjoy the video, guys.
Cell phones, I'm told we have, many of them are going to have statements, about 15 minutes in total. Then we will have 30 minutes for questions. So let me know if you want a question. And we have Superintendent Peter Payne, Director of Financial Crime, who's down. You didn't come in the order you were supposed to, down there. Sergeant Guy-Paul Larocque, Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, Staff Sergeant Ken Direction from the Ontario Financial Crime Centre, and Mathieu Bertrand, Acting Director in International Deployment Services, and Tammy Branch from CRA down at the end. So, gentlemen, go ahead, and I'm going to keep an eye on your time.
Thank you, Tonda. My name is Superintendent Peter Payne, Director of Financial Crime, as Tonda mentioned. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. In follow-up to the on-call raids and arrest linked to the CRA phone scam, I would like to provide you with an update on the status of work being done in India to combat fraud. Over the past few weeks, the RCMP assisted in the disruption of 3 call centers, arrested several fraudsters, and seized some equipment. A spreadsheet containing information on over 600 Canadian victims was also seized. Today, I would like to announce that the strong collaboration and continued support with the Indian authorities well before the recent raids has furthered the investigation into the CRA scam and is national in scope. What does this mean for Canadians? It means that increased RCMP actions stand a better chance of having call centers disrupted and dismantled. And that means protecting more Canadians from falling victim to these scams. The Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, CAFC, has been tracking the scam since 2014. In response, Project OCAST was launched in 2015 by a multi-agency team led by the Greater Toronto RCMP Financial Crime Unit. The OCAST team also launched a joint investigation with the FBI multi-agency task force that focused on Indian call centers, frauds, and worked with Indian police officials to the liaison officer in India. In October 2016, police in India arrested 70 people after uncovering a mass marketing fraud targeting Americans. Since the conclusion of Project OCAST, the RCMP, through its liaison officer, has continued to work in partnership with Indian authorities and other countries to identify mass marketing fraud call centers that are perpetuating the CRA fraud. Project Octavia has continued to build on the success and experience gained by Project OCAST. Project Octavia is led by the RCMP Greater Toronto Area Financial Crime Unit. We will be working with the CAFC, as well as Canadian and international law enforcement agencies, to continue to disrupt and take down these fraudulent call centers. The recent outcomes are part of a broad and long-standing international effort to address call centers that perpetuate fraud. This success has been a collaborative effort by the RCMP, the Indian authorities, and some of our Five Eyes law enforcement partners. The takedown of the call centers has been important for disruption of fraudulent scams which affect Canadians. As you may imagine, these types of international investigations are complex, but we're committed to continuing to work with domestic and international law enforcement partners to fight this type of crime. We will continue to pursue those who try to defraud Canadians of their hard-earned money. Thank you very much.
Who's next? Sergeant Guy-Paul Larocque?
Yes. Good morning. I am Sergeant Guy-Paul Larocque, Acting Officer in charge of the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. Today, I'm here to give you an overview of the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre and its role addressing issues in the CRA scams. To begin, the Anti-Fraud Centre is the agency in Canada that collects information and criminal intelligence on mass marketing fraud. It is jointly operated by the Ontario Provincial Police, the RCMP, and the Competition Bureau. Lorsque le Centre antifraude reçoit des informations sur une affaire de fraude,
when the CFA receives information on a fraud case, they analyze the data, disseminate the victim's evidence, and provide the necessary information to law enforcement agencies to investigate the crime. The CFC then uses this information to target the tools of scammers. A key role played by the CAFC is the assistance it provides to victims in the form of advice, guidance, and outreach. A volunteer senior support program maintains contact with victims to ensure that they are not re-victimized.
In the case of the CRA scams, telephone numbers linked to fraud complaints are shared with the appropriate service provider, which can terminate the account used by scammers. Similarly, email addresses, bank accounts, and merchant information are also shared with the appropriate partners to alert them about fraudulent activities. Fraud affects people around the world, and the CFC uses the information from fraud reports to engage foreign partners in ongoing issues. The CFC has been working with the RCMP liaison officer by providing information that has assisted in the identification and disruption of illegal call centers. By working with domestic and international law enforcement partners, the CFC and the RCMP are squarely focused on combating these type of scams.
As we can see, education is the best approach to combating fraud and getting partners on board. This is why the CAFC works so hard to encourage preventative actions such as public awareness and reporting. Since 2015, both the CFC and the CRA have released numerous bulletins and other public relations documentation to inform Canadians of this scam. The CFC also does media engagement to help get information out to the public.
Since 2014, the CFC has received over 74,000 complaints, where more than 4,000 victims reported losses of over $15.2 million. In 2017, there was a total of 822 CRA scams victims reported, with financial loss totaling over $3.1 million. Since then, the number have risen to a total of 1,362 reported victims as of October this year, totaling $5.8 million in losses. Et les chiffres continuent d'augmenter.
The numbers continue to rise because, unfortunately, mass marketing fraud is highly underreported. Every year, thousands of Canadians become victims of fraud. Most people don't think it could ever happen to them, but fraudsters use increasingly sophisticated methods to target consumers of all ages and from all walks of life.
The impact of fraud on individuals, families, and businesses can be devastating. Retirement savings, homes, or businesses. The best way to protect yourself, your family and friends, and your business is to be aware of the popular scams. Know what to look for and how the scam unfolds so that you're more alert on the warning signs. Preventing, detecting, and deterring crimes that affect the Canadian economy is a priority for the RCMP, but the key to reducing this crime comes from the Canadian public. So we urge people to contact the CFC to share any information that would help identify the location of these illegal call centers. En tant que société,
as a society, we all have a responsibility to protect one another. This is not a battle that can be fought solely by law enforcement agencies. This is a shared responsibility by all of us. Thank you.
Monsieur Bertrand.
Oui, merci. Bonjour, good day.
Good day. I am Inspector Mathieu Bertrand, Acting Director for International Liaison and Deployment Center.
I'm pleased to have this opportunity to speak about the role of RCMP liaison officers, both for this particular technical briefing and in general. Les agents de liaison font le lien entre les
Liaison officers, or LOs, act as a link between law enforcement agencies in Canada and in their host country. They collaborate in advancing criminal matters that have a Canadian connection. While liaison officers play a significant role in aiding Canadian investigations that reach beyond our borders, they have no jurisdiction abroad.
LOs work in various strategic locations around the world. In partnership with international law enforcement agencies, foreign governments, and Canadian embassies, LOs support the RCMP's mandate to fight transnational crime. Being located in areas where organized crime groups operate and using their knowledge of a host country, LOs are able to provide critical support to domestic and international partners.
As mentioned by my colleagues, fraud is a global problem without borders. By working with domestic and international law enforcement partners, the RCMP is focused on combating it in Canada and abroad. For example, the recent Indian call center raids are part of a broad and long-standing international effort to address call centers in India that perpetrate perpetrate fraud such as a CRA scam.
Regarding the CRA Scam's
En ce qui
investigation,
concerne l'enquête sur les
the
plaintes de fraude liées à l'ARC,
liaison officer works
les
with
agents de
India's
liaison ou
law
AL
enforcement
de la
agencies,
GRC travaillent avec les organismes
specifically
d'application de la loi de
India's
l'Inde,
Central
plus
Bureau of
particulièrement avec son
Investigations,
bureau central des
to
enquêtes,
investigate these
afin qu'il soit
complaints
possible
so
d'intenter
that
des
legal
actions en
action can be
justice en
taken in
Inde
India to
pour
stop the scammers at the
arrêter
source.
les arnaqueurs à la source.
Notre agent de liaison en Inde cherche constamment
Our LO in
des
India
occasions de
also
travailler avec les
consistently seeks
autorités
out
de ce
opportunities to work with
et de
and
leur
share
communiquer des
intelligence that
renseignements
Indian authorities
qu'elles
can
peuvent
act upon.
Étant donné que ces fraudes peuvent
Since
prendre
these
diverses
scams can
formes,
come in a variety of
from la
forms,
expliquée plus tôt
as
le
explained
Superintendent
by
Payne,
Superintendent Payne earlier,
l'agent de
the
liaison de la
RCMP
GRC travaille également
liaison
en
officer
étroite
also works
collaboration
closely
avec
with the
le
Canadian
Centre antifraude du
Anti-Fraud
Canada
Centre
en fournissant
by
de
providing
l'information
information
qui
to
aide à
assist
repérer
in the
les
identification of these call centers.
The recent raids have been a collaborative approach by all affected, including some of our Five Eyes law enforcement partners. International collaboration has never been more important, as new threats continue to challenge us on a daily basis. By working together and sharing information, we improve our collective ability to prevent crime before it comes to our borders. Thank you. Merci.
You're next.
Good morning. I'm Staff Sergeant Ken Duraction, Team Commander from the Greater Toronto Area Financial Crime Section. Financial crimes and fraud are criminal activities that victimize individuals from all walks of life, from the elderly to new Canadians and everyone in between. Based on my experience with these types of investigations, the impact on the victims are extensive, not only from an economic perspective, but also from a psychological point of view. I'd like to encourage you and all Canadians to continue to talk about the CRA telephone scam and similar cyber crimes to your friends, your neighbors, your family members, and your communities. The role of the Greater Toronto Area Financial Crime Section is to protect Canada's economic integrity. To this end, in 2015, the RCMP launched Project OCAST, which Superintendent Payne alluded to. Project OCAST found that only a small number of the perpetrators actually lived in Canada. Approximately 12 arrests were made in Canada, while Indian authorities made several arrests and takedowns, specifically of a 750 seat call center in India. This joint effort led to a significant decrease in the CRA-related telephone scam calls to Canadians. This investigation was an excellent example of how partnership, both local and international, are critical to achieving success in combating the scam. Over the course of the last number of months, our RCMP liaison officer in India has worked diligently with Indian law enforcement to specifically the CBI, the Central Bureau of Investigation, to address the call center fraud. This work, along with the work of the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, has culminated in this current investigation known as Project Octavia. The goal of this investigation is call center fraud prevention, disruption, and enforcement. As part of this goal, the Project Octavia team is working relentlessly to get prevention message across to Canadians, while at the same time mitigating the effect of the CRA telephone scam by assisting in the takedown of as many call centers in India as possible. We recognize that education and public awareness are the most effective tools to stop the scam. Thank you.
Thanks. Tammy.
Good morning. My name is Tammy Branch. I'm the Director General of Collections with the Canada Revenue Agency. First of all, I'd like to thank my colleagues from the RCMP for inviting me to participate today. The CRA sympathizes with taxpayers who receive threats from scammers posing as agency employees, and we take the issue seriously. Non seulement les arnaqueurs profitent des personnes vulnérables.
Not only do scammers take advantage of vulnerable individuals, they have created a great deal of public mistrust. Many people now automatically assume that any communication from someone representing the CRA is not genuine. This inhibits the agency's efforts to carry out legitimate work to administer taxes, benefits, credits, and related programs for the Government of Canada.
The CRA will call Canadians if they have not filed an income tax and benefit return, they owe taxes or money to a government program, there are questions about the records or documents they have already sent to the agency, or they're a small business that could benefit from tax support services. The CRA would like to remind Canadians how to recognize a scam and protect themselves from fraud. It's therefore important to note that the CRA will never call or leave voicemails using aggressive language or threaten you with arrest. We will never request information about your passport, health card, or driver's license. We will never demand immediate payment by Interact e-transfer, Bitcoin, prepaid credit cards, or gift cards. The CRA will never provide financial information or ask for it by email. We will never email you links to fill out online forms with personal or financial details or send you links to receive refunds. And finally, the CRA never uses text messages to communicate with taxpayers under any circumstances. To
protect yourself from telephone scams, hang up on suspicious callers and report it to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. You can confirm your tax status through one of the CRA's secure portals. My account, my business account, or represent a client, or through the My CRA and My Benefits mobile apps.
Call the CRA's individual tax account balance automated service at 1-866-474-8272. Je vous remercie encore de m'avoir invité à venir vous parler.
Thank you again for inviting me to speak today, and congratulations
on your successful efforts. Thank you, merci.
Thanks. Almost 15 minutes, a little bit over. Mathieu, Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, Mathieu, Radio-Canada. D'abord, je voudrais comprendre, qu'est-ce qu'il y a de nouveau?
What is new that you're talking about this morning? I know that you've shut down 3 call centers. Have you got any more details about the number of arrests, what city was involved, and all of that? As for the number of arrests, I don't have the exact information. And as to the city of India, I don't know that either. But we want to make people aware of the fact that action has been taken, and the information that we receive that lead us to these call centers will be shared with and forwarded to our liaison officer. This was as a result of a Marketplace report. Do you think that you should be taking that you should take this situation more seriously beforehand? No, we've been working on this issue for a long time. Yes, the Marketplace report did help in shedding light on the size of the problem, but we've been working on this issue for several years now, and we've been trying to make our partners aware of the problem. We will continue to do so to get good results.
Hi. I just had a couple questions with the RCMP, specifically with what's happening in India with your partners there. Is there, do you have a grasp of how many operations there are specifically, or how basically just the scope of this whole thing?
All we can say is this has been an ongoing issue for several years right now. To get into the scope right now, we don't have enough information, but we do know it is a large problem for Canadians as well as the Indian government, and we have good collaboration and continued support with the Indian authorities right now to combat this issue. So it is a large issue. They're aware of it, as well as Canadians in general.
And I think in here somewhere there's numbers about after a raid in 2016, basically these almost sort of grinded to a halt, but then popped up to a larger degree. Is there an approach with the partners in India to prevent these from popping up again, or is it sort of just whack-a-mole?
So it has escalated since 2016. So we had some success prior to that with the Project Outcast. So with this comes the more awareness for public awareness, education, prevention. Law enforcement alone, whether it's in Canada or India, cannot combat this problem. It has to be through prevention, education, awareness, which is what the media is doing. So it's, the CBC Marketplace was a good example that drew more awareness to the issue. So we will not stop. We'll continue our efforts. We'll try everything we can, but awareness prevention is the key to this.
Chris Nardi, Journal de Montréal.
Oui, j'ai quelques questions.
I have a few questions. I've been listening to you talk. I've been hearing about the number of arrests since 2016 and that things are popped up again. Why are we simply asking Canadians to be more aware of this because the law enforcement services aren't able to deal with it? And we're not giving up. I think that we have to continue discussing the problem to make people aware of the problem so that they can understand or they can recognize if there is a scam and realize that they're being extorted. Like with anything else, the action that will be taken, for example, in shutting down a call center, it will have a temporary impact. We know that other call centers will spring up after. But if we can really focus on prevention to educate people what is symptomatic of a fraud, then that'll be better. But in terms of prevention, what can we do? People do understand that after the 2016 police action, that even more call centers opened up. How can you prevent this? Through our LO, there's a great deal of consultation and there's a lot of dialogue with local authorities to make them aware of the magnitude of the problem. You have to understand what's a problem for us here is that we have victims here, and you have the players in India who are trying to scam Canadians. So there's a lot of information that we need to share with the Indian authorities to make them understand the nature of the challenge we're facing, what's happening to the victims, so that we can in turn work together. And do you have good cooperation? Or for them, it may not be a big priority? Clearly, as my colleague explained earlier, we have no control over police officers in India. We're talking about a country with more than 3 billion people, but I think that there have been some significant positive changes made, and I'm confident that our cooperation will continue. We've got good contacts now through our liaison officer.
Back on the second round. It's Julianne Lapointe, Radio-Canada.
Have any steps been taken to ensure that the victims get their money back? Well, that's always the big issue for the victims. Will they be able to get their money back? We can't promise anything. We can't promise that the money will be returned. But we will consider this, obviously. The thing you have to remember is, as soon as we recognize that there is fraudulent solicitation, as soon as people understand that this is going on, once the funds are sent to the scammers, it's very difficult to get the money back than to prevent it. And you've dismantled 3 Indian call centers. Can you get some of the money back? Or has the money just disappeared? I would say that's the biggest challenge, getting the money back to the victims. But we will do what we can to help the victims. But it's a huge challenge to get money that has been extorted like that.
Okay.
Okay, so it was mentioned that education and awareness are the best means of prevention. So I was wondering if you could tell us what the outreach efforts are from the RCMP and the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre to communities that do not speak English or French as a primary language at home.
That's a good question. The thing is, talk to, and it's been discussed here earlier, but talk to friends, talk to family, reach out to people, try to find out more about this on your own. And we know we haven't provided a lot of this information in different languages, which could be one of those issues we need to work on to get that messaging out. But if you're uncertain about the calls you're receiving or text messages, please talk to a friend, a family member, and discuss it further and reach out to different people.
So what languages have materials been printed in?
Right now it's only available in English and French, but there's other languages we'll probably look at getting some print material available for people.
I'm not sure if there are any reporters on the line, so I'm just going to ask, there's an operator on the line. Paul, can you see if there's anyone listening who wants to ask a question, and then I'll come back, if not, into the room for a second round.
Thank you. Please press *1 on your telephone keypad for participants online. For any questions, please press *1. We have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
The first question is from a participant. Please state your name and your media outlet. Your line is now open.
Hi, it's Jeremy Nuttall from the Star Vancouver here. I'm wondering if there's ever been any discussion with banks about when people come to withdraw like $50,000, just to sort of check and say, hey, you know, you're not doing this to send it to CRA, are you? Or just some sort of a check there at the actual point where they can take out their money. Has that ever been considered?
We do have a contact bankers group that we meet with occasionally, a couple of times a year, and this discussion has come up in general with that group. What I can tell you is I have heard from some bankers that they give good advice to those people that come in and recommend that they not send those transactions.
Okay. But that's not a matter of policy or anything?
Not that I'm aware of. So it comes with that good advice, that common sense approach. So the advice they're given basically is do not send or wire any funds unless you're certain where it's going.
Okay, thank you.
Next question.
Thank you. The next question is from David Common from CBC News. Please go ahead.
Yes, my question relates to actions in Canada. During the previous set of raids, as you noted, there were arrests made in Canada with people who were acting both as financial intermediaries and to provide lead lists to the call centers in India. Do you have reason to believe that there are people who continue to operate on behalf of these scams in Canada?
David, at this point, it's early in our investigation, but there very well could be Canadians involved in this fraud. It has happened in the past, so it's quite obvious that this could be a situation with the current raids as well.
Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up, David?
Thank you. No more questions on the phone line. Back to the floor.
Thank you. So back to Chris Nardi, Journal de Montréal.
I have further questions. First of all, outreach is being done in both in French and English, but the Chinese community, Haitians, all kinds of communities are being targeted. These are newcomers, they're vulnerable, and they're the ones being targeted. How can you do effective outreach if you're not able to reach out to the most vulnerable communities who fall for this scam? It's always a challenge to be able to reach out to all of the various groups and as effectively as possible. We're always prepared to do our best to focus on the most vulnerable. But in 4 years, the center must have been able to produce something in other languages. I'll give you an example. The Chinese community. At the end of the summer, we had an awareness campaign that we launched with immigrant students because there was a scam that had been started to target this community. So we did take steps to make these students aware of the fact that they could fall victim to these scams. So there's a lot of fraud that the fraudsters or scammers are always changing the way that they operate, and they're trying to get greater reach, but we're always prepared to look at different options.
Maybe a broader answer because it's good for everyone, but we've asked you how many people were arrested in India, how many call centers were stopped in India, how many people have been affected, how many Canadians. We've got no answer. What do you know about the width of this fraud? How many people are acting, and what we can do about it? What do we actually know?
We know it's large in scope. It's becoming quite complex in how they do this. So back years ago with OCAS, the call centers were large numbers. So they'd have hundreds of people working the call centers. So right now they're transferring over to a position where they have maybe a dozen or 15 people. So there's probably more call centers in place. All I can tell you right now is that we have a good collaboration with the Indian authorities. We're going to continue to follow this up. We're not stopping at this point. We will do what we can to dismantle and disrupt this process to protect Canadians, and the government is serious about this.
So we probably more centers. We don't even know if there are, in fact, more centers. That's what I'm understanding.
There are more call centers out there. We don't have information at this point to take them down. We're working on that. So as we get more information, we will take down what call centers we can in collaboration with the Indian authorities. Yes.
Charles Pinkerton. I politics.
Yeah, so if you say you're not stopping now, I assume stopping would be at the point of success. What would success be, or would there be a point that this operation would stop?
Well, I think success would be less and less Canadians falling victim to these types of frauds. So once again, getting back to the education awareness, that is the key to this. We can't stop everyone over there from doing these types of scams and frauds. There's not enough law enforcement here in Canada or India to do that. So the best means to tackle this issue is prevention and awareness.
For the CRA, has there ever been discussions, or are there discussions about moving to an alternative means of communications that can't be replicated, such as a phone call, which you still do, even though text messages aren't something you do? But have there been discussions about that?
There haven't been specific discussions that I'm aware of that to move completely away. I mean, we try to encourage folks to use our secure portals that I mentioned in my speaking remarks, which enables you to go in and see a lot of information on your account. And if you do, for example, receive any sort of email or fraudulent phone call, you can go in and look securely to see what's happening. But it's very difficult for us to move away from that because it's a way to reach those legitimate people that we need to reach as well.
Well, those portals, I don't think those are being replicated, or are they?
No, correct, yeah. But if what those portals allow you to do, though, is if you do receive any sort of phone call from the CRA, legitimate or not, and you're not sure of the information, the more people that are using those secure portals can go in and look at information about their tax account balance, for example, or whatever the payments were, or some other information about their account.
But there's no chance that we move to only using the portals rather than telephone calls? Is that in the future by chance? Or?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Matthew?
You say that scammers use text messages and telephone calls. Can the CSA try and deal with this in order to put a stop to some of these scams? Telecoms? The telecom companies, rather, Rogers and Bell. Yes, we do have discussions underway with the telephone companies, but it's quite a challenge to determine what call is a scam. the vast majority of telephone companies, well, as soon as they get information about a scam call, so that they can do their own evaluation, they go ahead and deactivate the phone number. And we also know that scammers are going to change their modus operandi. We know they know that a number might be shut down, but they can get another one right away. So we try to slow them down.
Do you have a follow-up, Nancy? No, Julianne?
The question by my CBC, are there people here in Canada who are connected to the scam? And do you think there will be any arrests? At this point in the investigation, it's too early to ascertain the scale of the crime here in Canada or the magnitude. The information is still, with this investigation, we're investigating the call centers in India, but they may be using outside external resources to help them with their scam. So if there are other players in Canada that we find out about that have played a role in this, we'll deal with this. And are we prepared to say that we're lagging behind what we should have been doing beforehand? You talked about outreach, but do you think that the outreach should have been done a few years ago? And same thing with the arrests. Outreach is something that is ongoing. Some people, sometimes we focus on the scams that will make the largest number of victims. For example, at the CAFC and at the CRA, well, we all have our ways of categorizing what type of scam is the most widespread. Maybe this would be fourth or fifth. So clearly, the easiest way to deal with the problem is to focus on prevention, to avoid loss. And if I take an example, the love scams, we often scammers are more active around around Valentine's Day. We work with several partners. We work with the Fraud Prevention Forum, which has been organized by the Competition Bureau. There are more than 200 participants in this forum. We try to deal with scams and frauds. I have a question for the CRA. A lot of people are claiming to be employees of the CRA, and are people now very cautious about these calls? And now is it becoming more difficult to communicate with people because they're lacking, they don't have any trust? I can say that it's more difficult, but I don't have an exact figure, because usually, I'm going to switch to English. I apologize.
To be more precise, we don't have exact figures. We do know that we do have difficulty sometimes connecting with people because they don't have the confidence that we are the true agency that we're. But generally, we ask people, or they would be referred to the anti-fraud centers, so their statistics would be more reliable than anything else.
That it's getting harder and harder. Is this like an upward trend in terms of maybe reduced confidence or concern about contacts from the CRA?
It's difficult for me to speculate without having specific figures. It's a sense that it's getting harder, but because we don't have the actual statistics, so it would be difficult for me to comment on that.
I'm just going to ask if there's any other question on the line, and then I think everybody's had a couple of rounds. Does anyone else have a question on the line?
Thank you. Once again, on the telephone line, please press *1 on the telephone keypad. You have one question. From a participant, please state your name and your media outlet. Your line is now open.
Hello, it's Vanessa Lee with CTV News. I'm just wondering if you can recap how many victims there have been to date and what the total losses have been and how much, if any, of that money has been recovered.
So far, since we started tracking the CRA scam, there's been over 4,000 victims. That's included within a little over 74,000 complaints. So more than 4,000 victims have reported losses of over $15.2 million. As far as we know, dollars recovered to the victims are very slim, if not at all. I'm not aware of any funds that the victims were able to recover after the money was sent.
And do we have an idea of how many Canadians have been targeted by this, whether by phone or a phone call or text? I mean, how many Canadians to now have gotten one of these calls?
We believe that many Canadians have been targeted by it, and what we see is believed to be only the tip of the iceberg. Just for example, on a specific phone number that we looked at, for the time that that number was in service for maybe 24, 48 hours, there's been over 20,000 calls on it, while if we look back at the complaints that we receive at the Anti-Fraud Center, there's only a very small amount of people that did report it. So that gives you an idea that solicitation is there. I do get those phones on my telephone as well once in a while, so nobody is fully protected from it, but the best way is once you recognize that it is a fraud, hang up, and that way that will end the communication with the scammers.
I have a question. Do you get that call on your work phone or your home phone?
On both, actually.
I get them on my work phone, but how do they get your work phone?
Exactly how they get it, I'm not sure. I believe it's random, but I do get it. I will get the odd telephone call, the odd message that they'll leave, or if not, a text message that I need to follow that link to be able to.
Have you ever had a real conversation with the guy or the woman on the other end of the line?
Actually, yes, I did. And it's funny, I'll tell you the story very quickly. About 2-3 weeks ago, I had a call from somebody who was posing as the Internal Revenue Agency from the States and telling me that I was qualifying for a grant. So the person had a very abrupt way to address me, and sound very like a person of authority. And when I was asking simple questions, the person was refusing to answer my questions and got frustrated by my questions. I never told the person I was a police officer. But then again, it just shows that, and I think it's important for people to know that typically if the person at the end of the line is refusing to answer those questions that are very simple, like one of it was the basic one, to repeat me their name, and at one point the person hung up on me. So obviously that person was not able to scam somebody else at the same time, but then again, it's an indication that if a person is refusing to provide answer to very basic questions, it's a good indication that it's a scam, and more than likely you just have to hang up, and then we suggest people to report it to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center as well.
Any other questions? Chris, you don't have another one. No, I'm not. Okay, yeah, thanks. Thank you very much for doing this, gentlemen. Appreciate it. And Tammy, ma'am, thank you for your time today.
Okay guys, so a couple of things to take away from this. First and foremost, I have to say I'm actually glad that the RCMP and CRA got together and basically updated the public with regards to what's going on. I appreciate the effort that they're doing now, and I'm glad that CBC Marketplace actually basically exposed the lack of work that they were really doing, even though they might be denying it here. Another thing that I'm glad that they brought up was that best way to stop scammers is to have awareness prevention. So all these videos that we make, guys, that we help people to scam bait and just waste the scammers' time, what we're trying to do is just help people become aware, right? Which is great, I think. And last but not least, I think one of the saddest things in this whole video was the crowd at the end. There's only like 4 or 5 people in the crowd. Oh man, that was so sad to see. But anyways, hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Make sure to share this with a friend so that we can stop people from, again, getting scammed. Awareness prevention, that's the best way to do it. So let's keep it up. Take care, guys.